So it's more than a couple years. Back to the whole time flies faster than you can imagine. But I was fortunate enough to where I grew up in a house of engineers. Everybody always worked on stuff, right? Like my dad would refuse to buy stuff around the house. He would build it, right? Like whether it was bookshelves or cabinets or whatnot, to working on the car. He wouldn't bring it to the shop to get serviced. He would do a lot of it himself, at least early on. And, I guess by osmosis or adjacency, like even though I ruined my toys, I tended to like, and a lot of kids did this, right? You took your toys apart, try and figure out how it worked. And you're like, you're pulling capacitors and resistors and inductors off a circuit board thinking, you're a Doogie Howser doing surgery. And the reality is you're just breaking your toy. But I don't know, for as long as I can remember, I've always been interested in tinkering and engineering, right? And like taking apart electronics and building Legos was the thing. And when I got into, junior high and high school, I was able and fortunate to actually get into these like robotics competitions where you got to build a thing that really did move and go and do stuff. And I had learned how to write software mostly as a hack to go through my math homework faster. But then I started realizing that like, hey, this is more than just for hacking out your math software or your math homework. You can actually get your software to run on this processor and control this robot and make it do X and Y instead of like, the baby circuits, right? Shine stronger, it gets more current, which means it steers a little bit more to the right than to the left, that kind of stuff. So, I would say tinkering and building stuff was a kind of an early childhood thing. Going from there to IT was pretty natural, right? Like you build and tinker with stuff, you play games, you wonder how it works. We had the internet, but it was cooler to actually get your modem to call your friend's modem, establish a PPP link between your two computers, and then you could really dogfight with the combat simulator, right? So like that kind of stuff is pretty much what I was doing in my teenage years. And the entrepreneurial bit was more of necessity, right? Like you get to college, you think you're rich because you've saved all the money you've earned in your high school job. You got like two whole $1,000, and you're like, this is gonna last. I'm not gonna have. I'm just gonna be able to enjoy this. I'm gonna be able to go to a party from time to time. And long of it, that doesn't get you very far at all. And I had to get a job, and I found a job actually writing software. And obviously, I was very very young at the time, but because I had a lot of experience writing basically math in C or implementing certain types of math functions in C, I got hired as a research assistant. It's for like a geoscience sort of company. And I don't know, I think that gave me the idea that like, you don't procedure and protocol and decorum are what society suggests you ought to have. But if you just want to do something, you can. And from there, 2 years later, I joined an actual startup in Austin, Texas. And as an engineer, and again, I was super young for what they were asking me to do, but I happened to be in the right place at the right time and I had experience. And, I loved it, right? At the startup, they gave you I like food and I like a good buffet. And a startup felt like showing up at the best buffet ever, right? Like there's miles and miles of all of these cool, interesting problems. And, there's only three people to help you eat your way through the buffet. So no one's going to get angry. No one's going to get possessive. No one's going to get territorial. If you want to eat anything, they're going to help. And they're going to say, knock yourself out. But if you start, you got to finish. And I don't know. I love that about a startup. Like you could, there was no problem you couldn't work on as long as you were willing to own the outcomes. The learning aspect of it too, right? Like in a startup, you can't afford to hire experts in all the verticals that touch whatever problem you're on. You have to figure it out. And for me, and there's a lot of people that are this way. Like the joy of figuring something out is kind of like a drug, right? Almost so to where you have to be a little bit careful, right? Because the startup is there to build a business and to make money and return stuff to the shareholders, not just for learning stuff. I fell into startups and entrepreneurship out of necessity. I needed money, and they needed someone with my background at the time, but it quickly became what I've been doing for 20 some odd years because it's one of those places where ultimately you kind of have complete freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating how you describe it like that because it's so true. And I started my career at startups and it was an interesting experience, because at the startup I was doing a little bit of everything, application engineering, doing, customer related work, help desk, just about everything. And I wanted to get into cybersecurity. And so I kind of took over the vulnerability management program of this startup for our solution, and that was exactly what you said was exactly what my VP told me. He goes, once you start it, you got to own it through and through. Like there's no going back. And, me not knowing what that is, young 20 something year old kid, right? I got into it and luckily I enjoyed it. But that was the mentality. And then from there I went to like really large companies and it's a totally different mentality. I mean, there's people there for 30 years and they're there for a reason for 30 years. You can literally just fly under the radar, do the bare minimum, get your paycheck, and not really learn anything new. Like it's possible in those environments. And for
Yeah.
me, that's like the complete opposite of who I am. Like I didn't start this podcast out of comfortability of talking to people, right? I kind of
Oh yeah.
started it because it's kind of pushed me outside of my box every time I do it, and makes me better. It makes me different, right? In startups, now I'm finally back at a startup, and
Yeah.
I basically own my entire vertical, and the CEO is just like, however you want to run your side of the business is how you want to run it. If it succeeds, it's on you. If it fails, it's on you. Like it's up to you to make this thing work. We believe in you, and it's all about leveraging other team members and their skills and getting their feedback and what worked, what didn't work, and implementing it into my side of the house, right? It's a totally different feel. And I always go back, you don't always have to be the number one guy, the CEO of a company, the founder of a company to be, successful financially, right? Like you look at like Steve Ballmer or the CEO of Microsoft, right? I mean, they were what? The number 5 guy in the hierarchy for years. I mean,
Oh
Steve
yeah.
Steve was a janitor for a while in the beginning. Like he did everything, He discusses it very openly. So it just shows you, you could still come out all right and be, the 10th or the 15th guy in line to the CEO when you believe in a mission and, see it through.
One of the stories that I heard early in my career that kind of cemented itself similar to that was this was the late '90s. There was a company called Level 3 Communications. They're still around. You know them today as CenturyLink. But their innovation at the time was just realizing that, like, hey, the internet's going to change everything, right? And everybody's going to get connected to the internet. And so we're going to need fast connections. And fast basically means fiber, means lasers. These things called this technology that was basically wave division multiplexing and dense wave division multiplexing. Basically, in one fiber, you can actually have more than one signal. You just shift the different signals by essentially the wavelength. And what Level 3 realized was, hey, this technology is going to evolve pretty much every 2 years, but it would be a mechanical engineering nightmare to try and trench new stuff every 2 years across the continental US. And so they came up with this system that is kind of like the revolver magazine, the magazine of a revolver. And so what they laid this conduit across the US. And they came up with a couple interesting things, right? One was this train car that basically had this big arm that would lay the conduit on the side of the rails. So that's kind of how they did it in a mechanical, fast way. But the second part that I found more ingenious was the conduit had this revolver magazine like structure, right? Like imagine like 5 or 6 hollow tubes. And what they could do is they had these flanges that they would mount to fiber and they would be able to just blow with air pressure the new whatever the new fiber technology is down the latest chute.